The good life is about connections, as researchers at Harvard University found. Close relationships, more than money or fame, are what keep people happy throughout their lives. Those ties protect people from life's discontents, help to delay mental and physical decline, and are better predictors of long and happy lives than social class, IQ, or even genes. And what happens without close connections? Quote, loneliness kills. It's as powerful as smoking or alcoholism. A recent survey found that 2 in 5 Americans feel like they lack companionship, that their relationships aren't meaningful, and that they are isolated from others. Surprisingly, the younger generation is lonelier than the older generation. So developing and maintaining close connections, close caring connections, is both life-saving and life-enhancing. Welcome to our Connections Journey. I'm Doug Carnine. Today I'm going to share with you 3 keys for building meaningful connections. 3 keys for making closer connections. Build kind habits, tear down unkind habits, and strengthen your sensing mindfulness. How do we create close caring connections? The answer from science is simple: kindness. Take a moment to consider how you felt when you acted with kindness or received kindness. Now take a moment to experience that feeling. That positive feeling comes from feel-good chemicals called neurotransmitters that your body produces to reward us when giving or receiving kindness. John Gottman and his research team at the University of Washington found that kindness is essential to close, caring relationships with couples who have children or don't have children, with straight and gay couples, rich and poor, as well as violent and nonviolent individuals. So the first key is increase your kindness interactions starting today. Kindness is central to meaningful connections with our partner, parents, children, friends, co-workers, and even strangers who need our help. Here are some ways to be kind when you're in a conversation. Respond by asking to hear more, agreeing, making an encouraging comment, or offering interesting, relevant information. For example, if one person comments about an interesting passage in a book, the other person might ask to hear more about the book, or ask to hear the passage read out loud. Here are other examples. Giving the other person the benefit of the doubt. For example, if the other person is late, don't interpret it as a lack of caring or respect for you. Be extra considerate when the other person is having a hard time. For example, when the other person is discouraged and overwhelmed. Take on one of their responsibilities and lighten their load. Sharing joy. For example, celebrate the other person's accomplishments. Take time to genuinely discuss how wonderful the accomplishment is. And finally, be gentle in conflict. Avoid criticism and blame. Professor Gottman found that caring couples responded to each other with kindness almost 90% of the time. The ratio of negativity to positivity was 1 to 5. So, for every negative interaction, there were 5 positive interactions. In contrast, the ratio in failed couples was 1 to 0.8. Basically, for every negative interaction, there was not even quite 1 positive interaction. Touching matters too. For example, one study looked at loving couples in which one of the partners was in pain. Researchers found that the pain decreased when the partners held hands. Researcher John Gottman summed it up this way, quote, for the hundreds of thousands of couples getting married each June and for the millions of couples currently together, married or not, the lesson from the research is clear. If you want to have a stable, healthy relationship, exercise kindness early and often. It should not come as a surprise that kindness is also essential in finding a loving partner in the first place. In the book Love Factually, author Dwayne Welch lays out in clear detail how a person can systematically and successfully search out and vet a loving partner. What are the non-negotiables? She wrote, quote, "If I had to summarize over 60 years of excellent relationship research in just one sentence, that sentence would be, quote, if you can find and be with someone kind and respectful, your relationship will probably work, and if you can't, it won't." Note that being kind does not mean couples or friends or family will never disagree or argue. The key is to be positive while arguing. Here are some ways to be kind during conflict. For example, while arguing about doing chores, instead of blaming by saying you never help around the house, focus on what you need with I statements. For example, the house needs cleaning and I would really appreciate some help. Avoid statements of you never or you always. Here's another example. Instead of saying, "You're late, what's wrong with you? You're just like your mother." Try this instead. "I feel bad for picking on you about your lateness. Let's talk about how I can help you avoid being late because I care about being on time." Remain positive in conflict by listening to your partner, friend, relative, colleague without criticizing, without becoming defensive, without shutting down, and without acting superior. Handle conflict with mutual respect, humor, interest, openness, and acknowledging your partner's feelings and ideas. Kindness and respect enriches all our connections, not just with a partner, but also with a friend, child, parent, or co-worker. But you cannot be kind and respectful unless you know what's important to the other person, what that other person cares about. Talking only about what interests you is disrespectful and unkind. You find out what your friend cares about by asking questions and being genuinely interested in the answers. Your friend's interests may differ from yours. So be curious about your friend's interests and be willing to learn from your friend about her interests. Remember, whether you are being genuinely kind or not depends on the other person, what they actually need and want. Building kind habits is the first key to improving your connections today. Your turn. You can pause the video and do this exercise now or do it later. You're going to pick someone to receive your kindness. Maybe you need to be more kind to yourself. Open the handout, 3 Keys to Unlock Life-Enhancing Connections. Then read the suggestions in the first section titled Build Kind Habits and follow the instructions. The second key to building caring connections is to stop your unkind habits. While kindness builds connections, emotion-charged fighting, anger, blame, jealousy, avoidance, and anxiety destroy connections. Starting today, you can begin breaking the unkind habits that block your connections with others and even with yourself. Recall a memory when you were unkind, for example, by being cruel, selfish, insensitive, insulting, condescending. Experience that feeling right now. That unpleasant feeling comes from other neurotransmitters in our body punishing us for the unkind act. John Gottman and his research team also identified the most damaging and unkind habits in what he called disaster relationships. Contempt was the most devastating, followed by criticism, defensiveness, and stonewalling, where you withdraw or shut down in a discussion. For example, if the wife says, "Ellen gave me some pea seeds that are really working well for her," the husband might reply, "It'll take more than new seeds for you to grow anything." Contempt almost ended my relationship with my wife when we first met. She'd say something I'd disagree with, and I'd ridicule her in front of other people. She felt publicly shamed and defensive. Fortunately, very fortunately, she told me we were through if I continued that unkind habit of putting her down in public. I quickly broke that habit, and I'm grateful, for now we've been connected for 48 years. Another telltale sign of disaster couples is a lack of interest in the success of the other person. If one person mentions being honored for volunteer work, the partner might ignore the comment or display a lack of interest by deadpanning, "Good for you," while continuing to read the newspaper. Breaking unkind habits is the second key to improving your connections today. Your turn. You can pause the video and do the exercise now or do it later. Turn to the second section of your handout. Tear down unkind habits. As you read through this second section, write down the unkind habits that cause your connection to be negative. The connection that you would really like to be positive. Next, pick one of those unkind habits that you want to break, the one that's really causing trouble. Is it an unkind habit of thinking, worry, regret, anxiety? Or an unkind habit of action, anger, contempt, ridicule? Think about what triggers that unkind habit. Visualize the triggering situation and then describe and visualize how you might take a kind action instead, or at least a neutral action, but something other than the unkind action. An unkind act to yourself or to someone else makes us feel bad. We usually respond by trying to think our way out of feeling bad. For example, we beat ourselves up for consuming too much fat and sugar. Then we tell ourselves to stop those negative thoughts, but that usually doesn't work. In fact, telling ourselves to stop ends up just being one more negative thought. So now we have two negative thoughts. First, we are eating too much fat and sugar, and second, we feel like a failure because we cannot control our eating habits. In contrast, when our mind is free from negativity, it can rest. Just as resting our body refreshes us, so too does resting our mind. A resting mind is a happy mind and ready to be kind. We know that our well-being and happiness depend on close, caring relationships, and these come from fewer unkind habits and more kind habits. But how are you going to build kind habits and leave unkind habits behind? Not surprisingly, it is through mindfulness. So the third and final key to improving your connections today is to strengthen your mindful sensing mindfulness. The practice of paying attention on purpose to cultivate a mental state that is present, non-judgmental, and free of thoughts, free from those thoughts that distract us from our intention. Mindfulness comes with its own slate of proven benefits, both for our physical health, such as less stress and lower blood pressure, and benefits for our mental health, less misery dwelling on the past and less worrying about the future, less preoccupation about success and self-esteem, and more deep connections with others. But now I'm going to take you through a special kind of mindfulness, sensing mindfulness. In sensing mindfulness, we direct our attention exclusively to specific sensations coming from whatever physical activity we are doing, whether it's active like Tai Chi, football, dancing, tennis, or non-action like just sitting and breathing. Doesn't matter. You can always use sensing mindfulness. When you realize you're immersed in negative thoughts, shift your attention to your senses. For example, instead of beating yourself up for eating too much, put down your fork and take a sip of water. Focusing on the sensations of setting down the fork, lifting the glass, and swallowing the water. In this way, sensing mindfulness breaks you out of your guilt about eating too much, and it slows down your eating. Your mind relaxes, and you are more likely to be kind than unkind. Earlier, I asked you to experience your feelings associated with a kind act. Now I'll take you through a guided sensing mindfulness activity, which I hope will rest your mind, calm your mind, and this way you can see the potential of sensing mindfulness. Sit up straight so that breathing comes easily. Settle in and feel comfortable. Put your hands in your lap. Close your eyes. Inhale deeply, then exhale completely. Totally focus your attention on the breath as you inhale and exhale. Feel your chest and abdomen rise and fall as you inhale and exhale. Feel the air as it comes in your nostrils and out as you inhale and exhale. Take several more of these deep breaths. Now relax your forehead. Relax around your eyes. Relax your cheeks. Relax your shoulders. Feel your body resting on the chair. Feel your feet resting on the ground. Visualize a place that gives you joy and contentment. Smile. Spread that smile throughout your body. Visualize a person who has given you kindness or received kindness from you. Smile. Spread that smile throughout your body. Keep that person in mind as you say to yourself, I am grateful for the kindness we have shared. Open your eyes. In using sensing mindfulness, your mind focused on your physical sensations and became calm. In contrast, when you are caught up in your emotional worries and wishes, you are not calm. Your agitation is likely to make you more unkind than kind. A particularly useful application of sensing mindfulness is the three-breath method. In the three-breath method, you redirect your attention away from negative thoughts by focusing on the air entering and leaving your nostrils and the physical expansion and contraction of your abdomen and chest for each of 3 slow, deep breaths. Let's practice the three-breath method. First, recall one of your unkind acts that still makes you feel bad. Call up that emotion. Now close your eyes. Inhale and exhale deeply 3 times, focusing on the air entering and leaving the nostrils and the physical expansion and contraction of your abdomen and chest. Feel that for each breath. Count as you take the 3 breaths. If you still have that upset emotion, take 3 more deep, slow breaths. This is something you can practice on your own later, the 3-breath method. The 3-breath method can be used almost anywhere. I use the 3-breath method to tame my unkind habit of anger. Taking a carton of dry dog food off a shelf, I accidentally dropped it, spilling the dog food all over the floor. Seeing the mess filled me with rage at my own carelessness. I swore and slammed the cabinet door shut, then I kicked the carton, which of course only made the mess worse and made me even angrier. What motivated me to use the 3-breath method to change my unkind habit of anger was becoming aware of the hurt I was causing my family. My practice of mindfulness helped me to develop this awareness of how I was hurting them. We need to deeply feel the negative consequences of our unkind habits in order to understand the importance of breaking those habits. When I would swear and slam a door in anger, I was so focused on myself that I never noticed the look of fear on the faces of my wife and daughters. I was using anger to control the behavior of those around me. For example, after I spilled something and became angry, my wife Linda might offer to clean up the mess to calm me down. Once I became more mindful, the shock of seeing how I was hurting and manipulating my family strengthened my motivation to change. By practicing the 3-breath method, my anger habit has softened. I learned how to recognize when anger was rising in me and to shift my attention to my 3 breaths, allowing the stirred up emotions to settle before I carried out an unkind habit. The power of the 3-breath method was driven home to me one day when I once again spilled that dog food and found myself looking down at a mess on the floor. This time, knowing that kicking the carton would only make the mess worse, I took 3 mindful breaths and started cleaning up the mess. I was actually relieved to not go through the feelings that are caused by throwing a tantrum. Sensing mindfulness is a valuable tool that does more than free us from our negative thoughts and emotions. It relaxes our mind, opens us to joy and gratitude, and makes us more aware of opportunities to be kind. The challenge we face is fitting sensing mindfulness into our busy schedules. Here's the good news. You can practice sensing mindfulness while you are doing your daily activities, such as washing, eating, brushing your teeth, dressing, cleaning, driving, taking the bus, walking, biking, and so forth. There's no need to squeeze an extra activity for practicing mindful kindness. Since I do these activities many times every day, I can do them without taking any extra time beyond what I need to do anyway. And if I get distracted, I return my attention to the physical sensations of whatever activity I'm doing. I call activities done with sensing mindfulness mindful micro practices. The way to transform a daily activity into a mindful micro practice is simple. Engage sensing mindfulness during the entire activity. The more we intentionally engage sensing mindfulness through micro practices, the more we reduce our mental bandwidth for negative thinking. We don't have the time and energy for negative thinking because we're paying attention to what we're doing. It increases our awareness of life's tiny joys and our intention to act with kindness. We notice when we are being unkind and then can change those habits, can break those habits, but first we have to notice them. And finally, micro practices give our mind a rest. I used to think that chores like taking out the garbage, dragging my daughters around to appointments, grocery shopping, waiting in line at a deli, and washing dishes were second-class activities. If I had to do them, I'd try to squeeze in something more important by multitasking, making phone calls or thinking about work at the same time. But now I realize that these kinds of activities can actually be a blessing, because at times they're great opportunities to rest the mind. For example, sometimes when driving my car, instead of listening to the radio or talking on my phone, I focus on the feeling of the steering wheel in my hands and on my field of vision, very broad, for safe driving. Or when grocery shopping, I sometimes direct my attention to my feet coming into contact with the ground as my hands feel the pressure of the car as I push down the aisle. Brushing my teeth is one activity I always try to do with sensing mindfulness. Sometimes just stepping outside can be a useful micro practice. Linda and I have a small dog who often can't be bothered to leave the deck and go all the way out to the grass to do his business. As a result, stepping onto our deck is an exercise in sensing mindfulness. If we don't pay attention to what's under our feet, we're likely to get a nasty surprise on the sole of our shoe. Using everyday activities as an opportunity to practice sensing mindfulness and rest the mind offers some powerful benefits in terms of changing our habits. For example, by breaking our unkind habit of being distracted when we're driving, we're likely to have fewer accidents because with sensing mindfulness, we're paying attention to what's around us. Sensing mindfulness can also help us build kind habits. For example, routine activities become more enjoyable, energize us, and give us moments of contentment and gratitude. All these are ways we can be kind to ourselves. In addition, we can make the most of our time. As I said earlier, it's not necessary to fit an extra hour in the day to practice mindfulness. We can do it during activities that we need to do anyway. Finally, we build up a mindfulness reserve, increasing our capacity for calmness and kindness in times of stress, in the same way that lifting weights in the gym increases our capacity to build physical strength to lift heavy boxes on moving day. Your turn. You can pause the video and do the exercise now or do it later. Turn to the section of your handout titled The Third Key, Strengthening Your Sensing Mindfulness. Follow the instructions for how to strengthen your sensing mindfulness. You've learned about the 3 keys for making closer connections. Build kind habits, tear down unkind habits, and strengthen your sensing mindfulness. Changing our habits is not easy, but it's worth the effort. And it is possible to change habits that we've had for a long time.